Guys, and welcome back to Make Reaction Reviews, where we reacting to things on the internet. Same day, same shirt, different video. And today we are returning to Dr. Jordan Peterson. He has been on a roll. He has been releasing clips and videos like left and right, back to back, and I am very much enjoying it. So you're going to be seeing more Dr. Jordan Peterson on this channel and on my other channel, Speak Freely. Go subscribe. Anyway, the name of this channel, the title was Social Contagion, which I think we can all relate to that. It's at least the social hysteria. But anyway, guys, we're getting right into it. But before you do, if you like this type of videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell to get notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, you can donate. My PayPal and Cash App link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. Another great way to support this channel is either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or visit my brand new merch shop. Links down below, and links to all the alternative platforms I'm on, my socials, all the ways to support me, and ways to do businesses, and the links down below. Other than that, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. All right, here we go.
But then the other thing that is scary about social media is social contagion of mental disorders. So we know that we're aware now that certain proportion of young girls who are identifying as gender dysphoric and attempting to become transgender, we're aware now that there is such a thing as rapid onset gender dysphoria.
Okay, so there's a book called Discovery of the Unconscious, which is a great book. Henry Ellenberger. I was given that book by a psychiatrist at the Douglas Hospital, who was my supervisor, a French guy, Maurice Dongier, a very distinguished psychiatrist, and he said, this is the psychoanalytic Bible, Discovery of the Unconscious. And the first, it's about that thick, and it covers Jung, Freud, Adler. It's a great book. But the first 300 pages is a history of pre-psychoanalytic thought, and part of that is a historical survey of contagion.
Yeah.
Right, and so the multiple personality disorder, for example, has cycled through about 300 years. And there are people who are temperamentally susceptible to such contagion. They're likely the same people who are relatively easily hypnotizable.
Yeah.
It's likely associated with high openness, by the way.
Right, okay.
And you could also imagine that if you're high in openness, it's harder for you to catalyze and specify an identity, and you're more diverse in your inner life, maybe even your emotional life. And so, right. And then there's confusion here too that we should talk about as psychologists. So sex and gender, and I've been accused of just saying that those are identical, but I know they're not.
Going back to what he said about the people who have certain types of characteristic traits or temperaments are the ones who are easily fall into sort of this social contagion, sort of this sort of cult-like ideology. And he kind of described what he's described before in other videos when it comes to openness and diversity. It's usually like female temperament or creative temperament, which is like if you're male and you're creative, you're most likely to have a little bit more of a feminine temperament.
If someone asked me, do I believe that there are gender fluid people? I would say yes. A young man who's gender fluid, is high in agreeableness, he's high in neuroticism, so he has a feminine temperament. He's more interested in people than things, and he's extremely high in openness. His temperament is fluid. He's creative, and so he's one thing one day and one thing the next, and his fundamental temperament is tilted towards the feminine. 1 in 10 women has a masculine temperament, and 1 in 10 men has a feminine temperament. That's a lot of people. And those people, especially if they're also creative, well, they're kind of at a loss in relationship to what to do with their identity. First of all, they have a hard time catalyzing their identity. It's like the definition of creativity. They're protean.
The truth is, the far left has become a cult. The people that display these distinct personality types are the most likely to join a cult. Those who want to feel validated. Those who are seeking an identity. Number 3, those who are followers and not leaders. Those who have very low self-esteem. Also, you ever notice how the far left is mainly comprised of women? It's not an accident. Women are also way more likely to be indoctrinated and recruited into a cult. Look at how many more women are claiming to be for Black Lives Matter or vaccine mandates compared to men. Remember, women are usually more likely to suffer from self-esteem issues. Thus, they're more likely to be on the hunt for a higher purpose, a deeper meaning. Thus, more likely to be indoctrinated by these groups.
If you see these social contagions or these mob-like cultures or these like mob-like narratives or something like that, or just cult-like narratives, a lot of times it is women who usually fall more prey to that. And again, he says more open. If you're more open, if you're more empathetic, if you're more of a people person, the idea of inclusion and diversity and all that stuff is going to appease or appeal to you more than it will do someone who's less open, which is someone who maybe lean more into the masculine side or more of the individualistic side or something like that. And it's one of the reasons why this sort of rapid onset gender dysphoria that this person has brought up affects way more adolescent girls than it does boys, because they're more susceptible to it because of their own temperaments and their own personality traits. Most girls, boys do too, but most girls, when they go through adolescence, are going to feel that way. They're going to feel uncomfortable in their body. They're going to feel weird. They're getting boobs and guys are looking at them, or they don't compare to the other girls and stuff like that. And boys go through it too, but because most boys might have a different sort of temperament or personality trait, they're just less likely to fall into this sort of social contagion or this sort of online cult groups that adolescent girls tend to fall prey into, and honestly are victimized too, because I think a lot of these people who control these groups, the adults, are kind of using that that feeling of feeling like awkward or weird in your body, or maybe even feel like an outcast, to their advantage to be able to groom girls into thinking or believing that they might actually be trans. That does not mean people are not actually trans, does not mean transgenderism does not actually exist, but we see this new class of rapid onset gender dysphoria for a reason. If you talk to a lot of girls who actually have detransitioned, they have very typical stories or testimonials when they come out. A lot of them say it's because I got super into these social platforms, these super social communities on TikTok or Tumblr, and it's almost like I got isolated into them. They love bombed me. They told me my life would be perfect if I just transitioned. They convinced me. They brainwashed me. It's like a cult.
I am Helena. I'm 23 years old. When I was about 15, I started using Tumblr. I had an eating disorder since I was pretty young. There's a lot of messages that said, if you feel bad about your body, that means you're trans. I was just going through this period of like, I don't like how I'm treated as a cis person. I don't want to be cis because cis means you're uncool and you're privileged and you're an oppressor and you're bad, and I don't want to be that. Obviously, I can't change my race. I can't really change my sexuality. So the only thing left was to start playing around with the gender stuff. So I decided to call myself a demi-girl, which is one of the 40 million genders. And that basically means that I'm mostly a girl, but I'm a little bit not a girl, which is just like, what does that even mean? And then after that, I went to demi-boy. And then after that, I went to gender fluid. And after that, I eventually went to trans boy. There was a lot of hopelessness for a long time, a lot of regret. The feeling of regret was intense.
You felt what every young woman I've ever met felt at a certain age, which is uncomfortable with yourself. And it feels like you were exploited at that moment of weakness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, it's completely normal for not only young girls, but often young boys too, to feel uncomfortable with themselves, uncomfortable with their body. But we have this ideology that is especially prevalent online that says that if you have those feelings, that means you're trans. I mean, there are literally people who say, if you don't even like your voice on a recording, that's a sign of gender dysphoria, and you need to go see a medical professional because you're trans.
Talk about taking advantage of people.
I really feel afraid for these other young girls like myself who they might not be. I consider myself lucky that I was able to get out of it unscarred really medically, but there's so many young people who can't say the same. And psychologically as well. I mean, it's just devastating to, especially from a young age, be lied to by adults at school and by medical professionals and told that your body is wrong, you need to change it, you need to get hormones, you need to get surgeries. That's devastating for a young person. So I'm just really concerned for younger girls and boys like I once was,
yes,
being led down this path. You have the trans activists and the trans community that exhibits some very unhealthy kind of cult-like dynamics.
And again, the gender that is most likely to join a cult are females, are women. Men do it too, but it's mostly women or men with or men with feminine temperaments, or men who just have like disturbing issues and want to take advantage of the women that are in these cults or children. But anyway, let's continue.
Because there is a lot of personality variability on top of biological sex. And it isn't a particularly rare woman who has essentially the same temperament as the average man.
Sure.
My suspicions are it's probably about 1 woman in 10. Now, it would depend on exactly how you made the cutoffs, you know, but I don't, if it's not 10%, maybe it's 5%. I don't care. It's somewhere in that range. And the same can be said for men. And so it's perfectly possible for a boy to have a temperament that's more like a girl. But that does not mean that he's in the wrong body. That's the wrong, like that's a pretty radical solution for a problem that's essentially a consequence of normal temperamental variability. Yeah. And so there is some utility in separating out gender from sex if you think of gender as personality, which I think is the appropriate way to think about it scientifically. But I knew back when I got entangled in my first political conflict, I thought, all this mucking about with gender categories is going to confuse and hurt way more people than it's going to help.
But the thing is, that's not how the left sees gender. The left sees gender as a social construct, not a personality trait that might be linked to your biological sex. So that's the difference. Because if it's a social construct, then we can just break down the construct, and therefore we can just redefine gender, which is not really the case. I do believe some gender things are social construct, but for the most part, it's kind of linked to your biological sex, but not always. Like he said, like if there's an overlap, we said 1 out of 10 women, 5% or 10% of those women might have male temperaments, and the same thing for men. I think I have a bit of a more male temperament. I'm more of a critical thinker, and I'm more of an individualist. However, I can also be very emotional and irrational at the same time, and so I can see myself in both. But some people lean more into the feminine, and some people lean more into the masculine when it comes to both men and women. But I just feel like progressives make it seem like all gender is only social construct and nothing else, which I don't agree with. But anyway, let's continue.
And part of this is this problem of contagion of confusion.
Yes.
So all adolescents really need, that's really what they need, is more confusion about sex and gender when they're 13. Yeah. That's just perfect.
Yeah.
It's freedom.
Well,
it's like, freedom. Yeah, right.
Yeah. It wouldn't be an issue. I mean, there's nothing, androgyny has been around for hundreds, thousands of years.
Right, because they're already going through so much confusion already because their hormones are going crazy. They are very susceptible to outside influences. And again, making sort of normal adolescent behavior and sort of that whole growing pains thing, turning that normal thing that most of us is going through as we hit puberty and making that into some sort of gender dysphoria instead of like, no, that's just normal female adolescent thing you go through. Same thing with male adolescents or something like that. Because I think, again, they detach the gender personality from the biology. It's just social constructs. So it's not normal. It's not supposed to be a part of your biological gender growth as a teenager. It's, the social construct is putting this on you. Therefore, you must break it by, transitioning or something like that. But anyway, let's continue.
For hundreds, thousands of years, I mean, there's ancient sculptures of androgynous figures. I mean, ancient cultures understood androgyny, and
there's plenty of historical precedent for the idea that androgynous personality is actually more of an ideal. There's lots of speculation in Christian mysticism about the androgyny of Christ.
Yeah, that's right. And, when I was a teenager, I used to look up to androgynous celebrities like, David Bowie was a little bit before my time, but he was androgynous. Androgyny Jagger was like, it was an ideal to emulate, and to be a tomboy was considered cool. But you would never consider medical intervention. You would never consider hormone treatment or modifying your body to.
How about mastectomy? How about attempting to make a penis out of the musculature in your arm? Penises are actually quite complex. It's not that easy to take your arm and turn it into one. certainly not without a tremendous amount of cost and trouble.
Yeah, she's true, but now being a tomboy you're considered a pick-me girl. But for me, yeah, being a tomboy is always kind of a cool thing. Like, I'm still a bit of a tomboy today. And also androgyny, I'm also attracted to androgyny. I think androgynous people are quite beautiful in a way. I'm not saying butch, I mean androgyny. But that might be also because I'm a creative. I like things like that. It's beautiful and artistic to me. So I understand that. That's why, like, I'm not necessarily conservative, because I feel like I'm do lean more towards liberal when it comes to sex and sexuality, because I do think it's okay for people to be able to express their sexuality, express their gender however they want. It's just that I'm not a progressive, because I don't go into this whole like, well, if your boobs start coming in and you don't like them, you should just cut them off and stop them from growing, period. Or I don't think that 5-year-olds should be able to change their sex or something like that. I'm kind of in the middle, but yeah, I agree with her. But anyway, let's continue.
And then, and then let's just imagine that you were wrong and confused just for a moment. You know, and the contrary argument is, well, you better deal with this early. It's like, yeah, you really know that, do you? You're so bloody sure about that, are you?
Well, the emotional blackmail that activists have used has been, you know, this argument that if kids don't get this early intervention, then they're at higher risk of suicide. Well, we have absolutely no idea whether, we don't, suicidal ideation or distress is not easily disentangled from confusion around your identity. It's not clear that it's simply transphobia or being trapped.
No, it's clear that it's it's clear that it's simply not. It's not simple, first of all, as you just pointed out. It's actually unbelievably complicated. So,
and
like most difficult things. Yep.
Yeah. Well, there's a paper that's been recently published by Lisa Lippman, who did the original exploratory research on rapid onset gender dysphoria, and she's gone and interviewed 100 detransitioners, which is a lot of people.
I think she just talked to Barry Weiss.
I totally agree with Dr. Jody Peterson. Matter of fact, people who actually do suffer from gender dysphoria and actually are trans who do get the operation, the suicide rate does not go down. They still have a high chance of suicide, and again, there is no evidence that they are committing suicide because of transphobia or something like that. It's most likely because they're still dealing with mental health disorders. So even when you deal with gender dysphoria and you're not just sort of just going through rapid onset gender dysphoria, or you're non-binary or whatever, when you actually deal with the medical condition of gender dysphoria, transitioning medically and surgically is not always the answer in itself. So you're asking someone who is an adolescent, has not fully developed their brains yet, to make a decision, even if they're not even dealing with gender dysphoria or the actual mental health condition, to make surgical and medical, chemical transitioning decisions at such a young age. When people who do it when they're adults and they transition, they still can regret it, and it does not mean it's going to alleviate the gender dysphoria in itself, which can add to the suicide rates being so high in the transgender community. Anyway, let's continue. 100
detransitioners, which is a lot of people.
I think she just talked to Barry Weiss about that.
Okay, yeah. Well, she interviewed detransitioners, so people who have transitioned gender and who now regret it. And there's a couple of patterns that stand out. One pattern that stands out is that often people felt the need to transition after some trauma had happened to them, so they experienced the trauma. And then another pattern that stands out is that these individuals were sort of sold gender transition as a solution to all of their problems.
I think I read the paper. I think that one of the most common claims of the detransitioners was that they were tremendously ill-informed about the full consequences of their actions by the relevant medical professionals.
Yeah.
And then we could also say it's certainly possible that the relevant medical professionals are too terrified to fully inform them.
Well, it's their job. I mean,
I know. I'm not. It's not an excuse, but it is. But it's still worth noting. because you could understand. Look, I know what happened in Toronto to the world's lead researcher on transsexual transition in children. I mean, his life was torn into shreds, and he's an apolitical guy. He's just a researcher, and he's a good one as well. Yeah. And so this fear, you know, you can say, well, you're a professional. It's your duty to stand up regardless of the fear. But when there's that much pressure, even people who stand up are going to be inclined to speak a lot less than they might otherwise. Yeah.
Oh, I've had a press council complaint made against me for an article I wrote for The Australian on transgender issues, and it wasn't upheld. But anytime a journalist in Australia wants to write about issues, particularly to do with medical intervention and gender dysphoric kids, they are subject to complaints, press council complaints.
Yeah, I totally agree that especially a lot of these doctors who are practicing in affirmation therapy, which is basically just affirming your identity, not actually analyzing you in any way, maybe pointing out other mental health issues you might be going through that might be making you think you might be transgender, can possibly be misdiagnosing you because they're too scared to actually, again, analyze you. But there is something cowardly about knowing what you're doing is wrong and still doing it anyway out of the own selfish fear of losing your position at your job. I understand that is a really, really hard thing to do, but it doesn't mean you're less of a coward for not doing it. He's also correct. A lot of people who detransition has also talked about that they was, again, sold a bill of lies, not really told to think about or even contemplate the negative consequences that can go along with taking puberty blockers or are chemically or surgically transitioning. A matter of fact, telling them to ignore and black out anyone who actually discusses it because they're just transphobic and they are just trying to stop you. They are just haters or something like that, which a lot of like groomers actually do, cult-like communities do, isolate you, only listen to us, we're the only ones who love you, everyone else hates you, everyone else is a hater. Anyway, let's continue.
Oh, and if you're an MD or a psychologist, if someone takes a complaint against you to your college, especially if that college has been increasingly dominated by activists, you are so screwed. Yeah. Like I had one client just cause me just an unbelievable amount of misery. Really? And well, because you can hijack the whole bureaucracy as a weapon. Yeah. And so
yeah, and that's what these activists do, and they're very good at it. And they only need to have a couple of successes under their belt, and they have a whole system for attacking people.
Well, we have human rights commissions in Canada, which are a quasi-judicial entity with increasing power. And that's a perfect weapon for any activist who's motivated to use it. And that whoever the target of the Human Rights Commission is, you can kiss 5 years of their life goodbye. And there's a high probability that they're going to be found guilty regardless of what they did. It's really, it's truly appalling.
But the difference is that Dr. Jordan Peterson still spoke up. So even though he was attacked, he still spoke up. So that's why a part of me is I kind of understand where teachers and doctors and therapists are coming from for not speaking up. But it's kind of like you're still kind of a coward for not speaking up, right? And this whole like believing in science, believe in doctors, but if doctors are being co-opted by activists and being politicized, then how can we actually trust it if they're bias leaning or they're prejudiced in their practice in itself, right? Anyway, let's continue.
Attacking people.
Well, we have human rights commissions in Canada, which are a quasi-judicial entity with increasing power. And that's a perfect weapon for any activist who's motivated to use it. And that whoever the target of the Human Rights Commission is, you can kiss 5 years of their life goodbye. And there's a high probability that they're going to be found guilty regardless of what they did. It's really, it's truly appalling, especially given that it's happening under the aegis, hypothetically, of human rights.
And the ability to give informed consent. And this is just this is an example of how fanatics hijack institutions which you would have previously thought were fairly centrist and moderate. So it's, the transgender activism issue is is a perfect example, because it's a tiny, like, transgender activists are a minority of transgender people who are a tiny minority anyway. So it's just like the smallest number of people creating an extreme amount of havoc. And it's a perfect example of how how a tiny intolerant minority can basically dominate others using all of the new tools that we have today: social media, bureaucratic complaints, mobbing, that type of thing.
Alright, that's it, guys. That was Dr. Jordan Peterson talking about social contagion. I totally agree with that lady. It is fanatical, and it's mob culture, and it is kind of crazy how just a small minority, because they are the minority, they're the loud minority, can have so much control over what's going on in universities, the educational institutions, social media, Silicon Valley, Hollywood, entertainment, mainstream media, literature, like the gambit, right? Anyway, guys, tell me what you think of what they said, what I said in the comment section below. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications when I do upload. All that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, you can donate. My PayPal link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, subscribe. And another great way to support this channel is either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or visit my brand new merch shop. Links down below. I also have a second travel vlog channel, I travel as a lifestyle, or I live abroad. If you'd like to know where I am in the world, you can go to the description box below and also in the comment section. Hit the link, go subscribe to my travel vlog channel, and or follow me on my travel Instagram. My storage is usually what's most up to date. And you guys have an amazing day. Bye.